Good day everyone, Leo J. Smithmaster here with what I think is my first full-length video based on a board game. And that board game is Final Girl, which is a single-player game where you play as a final girl who has to rescue victims, gather items, and kill the killer before you yourself are killed. The way the game works is that there's a core box you need to play, but you can't play with it by itself because you need at least one feature film, and each feature film is basically an expansion pack. And each of these feature films comes with 2 final girls, 1 killer, and 1 location, which you can mix and match between packs to make a very wide variety of different combinations. And even if you do just have 1 feature film, the way the setup works means that it's very rare that 2 games will ever feel the same. Most of the feature films take inspiration from various horror or horror adjacent films, such as Alien, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, or The Thing, but obviously not every such movie has been covered in a feature film. I have picked 3 movies that I'd like to see adapted into Final Girl feature films, and over the course of this video, I will tell you how I would design their killers, locations, final girls, and more if they were ever adapted into expansions. The movies I'm covering in this video will be Jurassic Park, Totally Killer, and Death of a Unicorn, and hey, if this video does well enough, I might make a follow-up. I've got to go now, but don't worry, I'll be right back. First up is the Jurassic Park themed box, which would be called something along the lines of Trouble at Dino Land. The killer would be called the Tyrant, and is a T-Rex with high health, high damage, and low speed. The Tyrant would come with a limitation and a strength. Her limitation would be that the killer phase is ignored in the first round, though to slightly balance this, the terror deck would hold 1 less card when playing with her. As for her strength, she would take reduced damage from any non-player damage, such as Frostbite in Station 2981, falling off a railing in Sunny Days Mall, and just any event which might damage her. But item cards and action cards will still damage her normally. This is definitely a location-specific effect, but she's quite powerful as it is, so it'd more be a bonus than the core of her kit. Next up is the location, which is the aforementioned Dino Land, and its key feature would be its electric fences. These would be between certain locations, and either some events or terror cards, or just a new track or mechanic, would turn them on or off, but one would always start on, and there could never be more than 2 electric fences turned on at a time. Electric fences would stop anyone from passing through them, and if anyone panicked in their direction or was forced to move basically through them, they wouldn't move through them and instead would take 1 damage. Certain spaces would also have jeep tracks passing through and connecting them, and if you get the car keys item, it would allow you to add the jeep to one of these tracks, and you could use the jeep to carry up to 4 victims with you, rather than the regular 2. This would have unlimited uses, but you'd still only be able to move 1 space at a time, and if you ever left the jeep track, then the jeep would just stay on that space, and to use it again you'd have to go back on that space and drive it back along the track, so you can't just teleport it to somewhere else on the same track. And the jeep track could also be blocked by electric fences. Other than the car keys item, one of the items which would come with Dino Land would be the flare. It'd be a single use item, but on the killer phase of the turn you used it, the killer would always target you and would not attack any victims. Finally, for the final girls, we would have Lana and Elsa. Lana's ability would mean that if she ended the action phase with at least 1 victim on her space, she could buy one of the cards in the discard pile for its cost +1, meaning she'd be less likely to be able to never move or stuff like that. And Elsa would be able to change the value of the panic die by 1 in every roll in the panic phase, which would be especially useful on maps such as Dino Land, where panicking can cause them to take damage. And by them I mean the victims. Next up is Totally Killer, a self-aware time travel slasher inspired by movies such as Back to the Future and Scream, both of which it references. I'll try not to go into direct spoilers, but if the movie sounds like something you'd be interested in, I'd recommend skipping this section and watching it after watching the movie. And this box, the feature film box, would probably be called Time to Kill. This time I'll start with the location, which would be a kind of large town with locations such as the school, fairground, and a cabin in the woods, rather than just being one house like some of the other locations are. The key mechanic of this map would be that each location is split into two halves, the past which would be grey, and the present which would be yellow. The final girl can jump between these using certain time travel spots, and a new action card that lets you bring victims with you if you get 2 successes. And the killer would get between them using terror cards, and there would maybe be a special rule that makes the killer jump to your zone if he's targeting you and on the same space as you, but in the other zone, for 1 movement. And obviously, you can only attack or target meeples in your own time zone. The killer would be a fairly basic killer who would prioritize damage and killing victims over the final girl, but would get some bonus effect if there were no victims on the board, and would gain bloodlust if any victims panicked in the panic phase. So with him, the final girl would have to prioritize rescuing as many victims as possible, or distracting the killer with whatever the location has to offer. The town would be called Petunia, and the killer would be known as Killer 21. Last of all, we move on to the final girls. The first is Gemma, who deals extra damage to the killer if there's a victim on her space. And next up is Laura, who lets you, once per roll, discard a card to raise the value of a single die by that card's cost. Again, we have one final girl whose ability relates to the victims and another who can change dice rolls. Those just happen to be the most fitting abilities for the characters these respective final girls are based on. The final feature film in this video would be based on the 2025 movie Death of a Unicorn, which was the first horror movie I ever saw in cinema, unless you count Jurassic World Dominion, but that's not really that scary. It would probably be called Something in the Woods. I would have the unicorn as its killer, and the location would be the Odeon compound. The Odeon compound would have a 16 space design with 4 outer corners and 4 outer rectangles making the forest, 4 inner corners making the courtyard, and 4 rectangles making the house. This is the only one I've probably made a mock-up for, and that should probably be on screen right now. The light green spaces would be the exits, and the orange zones would be search spaces, with the other colours just representing the different zones. And quickly, here's how I think the spaces would all be connected. The gimmick for this location would be that the killer would be stuck in the forest for the first 2 rounds, and then would be able to enter the courtyard but not the house for a further 2 rounds, before finally gaining full access to the entire map. This would make it easier to do searches earlier in the game, but it would be harder to help victims to escape as the killer would be lurking near the exits near the start of the game. The unicorn would be a fast killer who focuses on victims over the final girl. It would even have an ability called Fair Maiden, where if the final girl and unicorn are on the same space with no victims, and the unicorn has not yet been directly attacked by the final girl would get a base of 3 dice on all her rolls. The final girls of this video would be Riley and Ella. Riley would get an extra die on search rolls, and Ella would get an extra die when doing actions on an exit space. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching, and a like and a subscribe would be greatly appreciated, as I'm hoping to reach 600 subscribers before my birthday in May, or maybe 650 because by the time this comes out, or at least when I'm recording it, I'm pretty close to 600. Future videos I'm working on and might release include making a type system for superheroes and supervillains, and ranking every single Overwatch hero. If either of those sound good to you, please comment so in the comments below, as well as what your favourite scary movie is. Have a good day and ta-ta.